Senior Urban Specialist in the World Bank. Welcome to another E-Institute webinar. Today we have the 6th webinar of the Inclusive City series, which cover topics revolving around the challenge of informal settlement. As you probably know, today there are about 1 billion people living in informal settlements around the world. The Inclusive City series aims to disseminate lessons from international experience on upgrading formal settlements. The series largely draws from the recent initiative between the World Bank, Cities Alliance, UN Habitat, GIZ, and the Inter-American Development Bank on documenting and analyzing lessons from national policy and programs in 12 countries in order to better understand what worked, what did not, and why, in terms of scaling up affordable housing and upgrading policies and programs. I'm absolutely delighted to have Mr. Ajay Suri, Regional Advisor for Asia for the Cities Alliance. I know Ajay for many years. We worked together in India and in the India, Brazil, South Africa Human Settlements group. Ajay has been at the forefront of formulating policies, strategies, and programs in India for disadvantaged groups for over 20 years. As a member of Cities Alliance Secretariat for South Asia, Ajay built strategic partnership across many organizations, including the World Bank, led policy dialogue with national, state, and local governments on urban management, city development, governance, and slum upgrading in particular. A case in point is the dialogue on slum upgrading with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation in partnership with the World Bank. A program approach rather than a project approach to scale up slum upgrading as the most viable solution to achieve scale. Today, Ajay will take us through the challenges and opportunities in scaling up slum upgrading from projects to programs in India, through the experience of the Basic Service to the Urban Poor, BSUP, and the Rajiv Awas Yojana RAY program. He will discuss the outcomes of the BSUP, the development of statewide affordable housing and property right reforms for the urban poor, and the scope of citywide policy on slum-free cities by 2020. Without further to add, let me now request Ajay to begin his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. I hope I am audible to everyone. Thanks, Andre, for the kind words and the introduction. And thanks everyone for making it convenient to join this webinar. Let me start by trying to connect Cities Alliance with slum upgrading issues globally and in India. Let me first introduce Cities Alliance to everyone, and I'm doing this while the presentation is coming up. Cities Alliance is a global partnership which is focused on urban poverty reduction, very precisely scaling up successful approaches to poverty reduction. And the partnership also promotes and strengthens the role of cities in sustainable development, which is to say it leads the advocacy that nations need to have sustainable cities to achieve and sustain high national growth. The program is focused on slum upgrading. There is a very strong global policy focus on slum upgrading. And as an example, Cities Alliance, right in the first year of its inception in 1999, had prepared Cities Without Slums Action Plan that drew a lot of global attention, and it was incorporated into the UN Millennium Development Goals as Target 11. After this very brief introduction of Cities Alliance, let me share the challenges, urban challenges facing India, which hopefully would help to appreciate the slum issues in the country as well. The urbanization rate is low at 28%. When I say low, it's relatively speaking compared to the urbanization rates in the Latin American countries. But if you look at the numbers are huge. Urban India accommodates 337 million people. Besides the fact that there is a very large urban population, India is also faced with the challenge of spatial concentration of this huge number. More than 1/4 of the urban population is concentrated in the metropolitan cities, which in itself is a huge challenge in managing these metropolitan cities. The urbanization challenge has brought in its fold the challenge of meeting the habitat needs of the urban people, providing them with housing of good quality and providing them with access to urban basic services, largely water and sanitation services. India is also faced with the challenge of increasing slum concentration. The urban population living in slums has increased from 18% to 28% in a span of 10 years. We also have, the country also has cities like Mumbai and Faridabad, which have a slum concentration of more than 50%. In this perspective, India has been trying to, or has been grappling with slum upgrading challenges for the last 50 years. If you look at the slide, what I have done is I've listed various programs that the country has initiated since 1960s. What you will notice is the common thread that runs through all these programs is the policy trying to facilitate people's access to improved services, which means the government has been trying to invest in public goods rather than private goods in terms of housing solutions. According to me, the turning point in national slum upgrading policies was in 1980s when, with the support of UNICEF, the Urban Basic Services program was launched. The reason I term this as a turning point is that with this program, the government achieved a disconnect between land ownership issues and provision of services. Under this program, what was decided was that services would be provided in settlements where the landowning agency gave a commitment that people would not be moved for the next 7 years. But as you know, in India, urban development falls in the business purview of the state governments. And the policy response across states has been varied. Although the national programs were propagating improvement in services rather than provision of houses, we had examples like in Delhi, where something like 450,000 households, slum households, were resettled under site and service program or by providing them dwelling units. Let me share two major urban initiatives in India focused on slum upgrading. Let me start by familiarizing you with the National Urban Renewal Mission, which was launched in the year 2005. In India, historically, the plan allocations have favored rural development, and the National Urban Renewal Mission was the first major urban initiative in India. It was also ambitious in terms of scope and coverage. The mission focused on the 65 most important cities in India. The mission focused on encouraging urban reforms in these 65 mission cities, and the endeavor was to fast track planned development in these cities. If we talk about urban reforms, the focus was on efficiency, bringing in efficiency in urban infrastructure and service delivery mechanisms, engaging communities more actively in planning and program designing, and bringing in accountability of urban local bodies and the state parastatal agencies towards citizens. It was ambitious in terms of investment outlays as well. The mission had planned an investment of around $25 billion over a 7-year period. It was, in addition to this $25 billion, it was also expected that the states and the cities would use the grants, that is the $25 billion grants, to leverage resources from capital markets and mobilize private investments. This did not happen for various reasons. The National Urban Renewal Mission was implemented through a two-track strategy. As I said, the mission covered 65 major cities. These included all the metropolitan cities, the state capitals, and other selected cities which were of heritage or tourism importance. The two main components under JNNURM were the urban infrastructure and governance and basic services for urban poor, implemented by two different urban ministries, urban development and housing and urban poverty alleviation. In parallel to JNNURM, which covered 65 mission cities, we had two major programs: Urban Infrastructure Development Scheme for small and medium towns, and Integrated Housing and Slum Development Program, which covered all the other urban centers in India. Since this webinar is focused on slum upgrading policies, let me focus on basic services for urban poor. I would flag four major components of BSUP: slum rehabilitation, provision of basic services in low-income settlements, creation of affordable housing stock, and providing the slum households or the low-income households with access to community facilities and social services. That is as far as the investments under BSUP are concerned. The urban reforms focused on earmarking municipal budgets for delivery of services to the poor. That was 25% of the municipal budgets, and reservation of land in residential layouts for housing for the economically weaker sections of the population. If you look at the numbers, the achievements in terms of creation of new housing stock, whether under redevelopment of slums or creation of affordable housing stock, the numbers are impressive. The mission approved construction of more than 1.5 million dwelling units for the economically weaker section and slum households, but achievements were not very impressive. State governments and the cities managed to complete just 1/3 of the approved numbers, and the issue with BSUP was that the program had adopted a project approach. It selectively covered slums in a city, in the 65 mission cities, but there was no transparent criteria for selection of these slums. And it was the ease of implementation of these projects that was the driving factor, rather than looking at the development needs of various slum settlements. A typical intervention would move people to transit camps, demolish old housing, and construct multi-storied apartments and move people in. But in the whole process, the community engagement was very, very weak. People were not involved in planning and implementation of these projects, and a number of independent social audits show that the beneficiary contribution for new units was much beyond their affordability. The beneficiary contribution amounted to just 10% of the unit costs, but even that was beyond the affordability of the people. And in addition, the people, earlier in slum settlements, people were using their housing unit for both shelter and workplace requirements, whereas under the redevelopment, the workplace utility was lost. The implementation progress has been slow, also because the states and the urban local bodies were slow in generating the matching funds to match what the central government was providing, and there was very weak local capacity in planning and implementation of the projects. Keeping in view all the shortcomings of BSUP, the Government of India, that is the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, announced the National Slum Upgrading Program, which is the Rajiv Awas Yojana. The endeavor was to move away from the project approach under BSUP to a program and whole city approach under RAY. The program aims at creating slum-free cities and assigning property rights to people living in slums. It's a two-pronged strategy, improving habitat conditions in the poor settlements, but also adopting appropriate habitat strategies to prevent future growth of slums. And when I say the program is trying to improve habitat conditions, it's largely trying to provide better housing of a minimum standard combined with basic urban services with tenure security to all slum dwellers with view to render cities slum free. As I said, the program was launched in the year 2011. The first 2 years of the program was more in the preparatory mode, and the implementation phase started in the year 2013. The program has a two-phase or two-step implementation strategy. Cities are encouraged to prepare its slum-free city plan of action, and then within the perspective of the plan, prepare projects for prioritized slums. Besides trying to improve the housing conditions in slums, RAY is also focused on enabling reforms to address positive factors for growth of slums. But more importantly, it's trying to develop institutional mechanisms for preventing growth of slums, including creation of affordable housing stock. What was a lacuna under BSUP is being sought to be addressed under RAY by facilitating supporting environment for expanding institutional credit linkages for the urban poor. Besides, the program is also focused on improving capacities at the local level for implementation of the program, and it is empowering communities through their participation in decision-making process. If you look at the reforms in urban governance that are recommended under RAY, it has moved away from assigning ownership, which has its own pitfalls, to assigning mortgageable and renewable long-term inheritable lease rights to slum dwellers, long terms to the extent of 15 years. Under BSUP, what was done was land was reserved for low-income housing, whereas under RAY, what is recommended is that 15% of the built-up area or buildable area in cities or 35% of the dwelling units would be reserved for the urban poor. RAY continues with earmarking of municipal budget for provision of basic services to urban poor, but goes a step further by recommending that municipal cadres be established for social and community development and urban poverty alleviation. The suggested reforms are all directed towards slowing down the growth of slums. For example, it suggests state policy for affordable housing. It suggests master plan to provide for inclusive growth through inclusionary zoning and other measures, simplification of building plans, approval process, and amendments in Rent Control Act to promote rental housing, all geared towards increasing the stock of affordable housing. the implementation progress in the preparatory phase, that is the year 2011 to 2013, 48 cities were covered under the program across 16 states, whereas post 2013 projects have been sanctioned in 15 cities across 3 states. These data relate to January 2013, and I'm sure more progress has been made over the past 3 months as well. If you look at the implementation challenges of Rajiv Awas Yojana, there is a weak focus on inclusive planning covering various population groups, settlements, and ensuring spatial coverage across the city. It's recommended under RAY that the city prepares its slum-free city plan. City development plans were prepared under GNNURM, and master plans, that is the spatial plans, are mandatory. But the continued problem in the cities is the sectoral plans are not converging with these city plans, and that leads to a lot of planning issues. The implementing agencies continue to have weak capacities to engage with slum communities. They are unable to engage the communities in evolving, upgrading or redevelopment plan for the settlements, and in consolidating these settlement level plans into a slum-free city plans based on the aspirations of the slum communities. The implementing agencies have low exposure to various options for slum redevelopment and upgrading, and they have little technical know-how for extending urban services for in situ slum upgrading as well. All this is resulting in a large focus on in situ slum redevelopment under RAY, and there are very less number of proposals focused on in situ upgrading, that is improving services but leaving private investment in housing to the households themselves. This in brief was my presentation on the slum upgrading initiatives in India, and I would be happy to respond to queries from the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajay. It's very fascinating if we look at the history and the current effort in India to address the challenge of slum. As you said, in percentage might not be very high compared to Latin America, for example, but in absolute terms, it's formidable. I think that the other fascinating lesson from what you just said is that although the conscious effort from the government, the state and cities to scale up the interventions, they still face a major challenge to move from a project mentality to a more programmatic, policy-based approach, and to avoid scaling up models that might not be the best fit for the specific situations. Also, when you are creating a national program, you have the challenge to offer enough flexibility to adapt for different regional contexts. I think that's another important challenge that you mentioned. The low capacity and the mentality, the traditional mentality of addressing shelter needs, I think is another element that came across the experience of India. That at the end, although all the policy orientations toward in situ upgrading and incremental improvement of service, the result, most of the projects have focused on slum redevelopment and resettlement. I think all these resonate quite well in many countries that have tried similar approaches. Let me now ask you questions for your comments. Then we're going to open for questions from the participants. So the participants can start typing their own questions on the screen, and then Ajay will result. Ajay, I would like to, if you could tell a little bit more about the citywide slum-free plans that Ray for the urban poor advocate. I think that's an innovative element from BSUP, and it's kind of a first step for cities to have some kind of a shelter, a housing municipal plan that can look on a long term the issue of housing, housing needs and housing supply. Can you explore a little bit this element, please?
Sure, Andre. You know, if you look at what is expected out of the citywide slum upgrading plan, it's expected that all the slums would be enumerated in the citywide slum upgrading plan. There would be at the back of the citywide slum upgrading plan, which I can call CSUP, would be a very strong MIS on all slum settlements in the city. There would be an assessment on the tenurability of each slum. There would be an assessment of the access to services for each slum. There is an assessment of the socio-economic profile of the households in each slum as well. And then let me also partly respond to the questions that are coming in, and that is where the community is engaged in trying to seek solutions for each settlement in terms of upgrading. What is it that the communities would like to have? Improvement in services, leaving house improvement to the owners themselves, or they would like to go for an entire redevelopment, that is demolishing old houses and constructing multi-storied apartments there. And also engaging with the community, trying to understand their resource mobilization capacities as well. And then depending on the vulnerability of each of the slums and other criteria, the slums are enumerated, are prioritized, and then a long-term action plan is drawn which should inform the planners at large as to what is the yearly schedule of improving slums and how much investment it would entail. And when the city is doing a diagnostics of each slum and is trying to assess the service availability in the settlements, it would also be expected to do some kind of a total station survey to find out how amenable are these settlements to network connectivity, and then trying to find solutions to improve access to services in each settlement. Another very important component of the slum upgrading plan is how does the city propose to increase the housing stock in future, which would slow down the proliferation of slums. I hope Andre have been able to answer or give a brief idea about the citywide slum upgrading plan.
Thank you so much. No, it was, I think that as we explained, it's a big move from where BSUP, the design of BSUP, now with an incentive for cities to develop some kind of a housing municipal plan or a slum-free strategy, starting by analyzing the conditions, the housing needs, the different policy issues, and based on this information, prepare a citywide plan to address the slums and the future housing needs. Would you please answer now? There are some questions on the table. I think Ana Claudia's question was quite similar to this one. Maybe you can cover a little bit more.
Sure.
But Matt Glasser has a question about the mortgageable lease rights, and Forum
Yep.
has a question about community involvement in RAI.
I hope I have answered Forum's question on community involvement on the rate. Let me, since Anna's question is related to what I was talking about, let me first respond to the issues that has been raised as to how CSUPs are connected with the spatial plans. Anna, when the tenability assessment of each of the slum settlements is being done, one of the criteria is also to look at the land use and see how that is how the planners, city planners are trying to converge the citywide slum upgrading plan with the spatial plan. I'm not saying that any slum settlement which is not in the designated residential use would be classified as non-tenable, but then they would need to go back to the drawing board and reclassify that area. Also, another element is addressing the issue of the development control rules. It's something very similar to what is being done in Brazil in terms of the inclusionary zones. And the cities would need to find answer as to how the DCRs can be tweaked to facilitate slum upgrading in the existing slum. Matt's question relates to the long-term, the 15-year mortgageable lease rights. These would vary, the design would vary from state to state, since this is the state subject and there is very little that the national policy can recommend in terms of the lease rights. But the way RAI has moved, initially I remember when the program was being designed, there was a talk about assigning ownership rights to the slums. And then it was realized that there would be a lot of implementation challenge. And in consultation with the states, they decided to move from ownership rights to the mortgageable long-term lease rights. But as I said, this needs to be designed by the states since it falls in their domain.
So much, Jay. And I would like to invite all the participants to send their questions. I think we're having a very good discussion right now. We have a question from Kimberly, and Matt also sent another question related to the mortgage for lease, and also getting new questions. So, Jay, if you could please keep answering
Sure.
and commenting on those questions.
So let me first respond to what Matt has, the issue that has been raised by Matt. Yes, there are states which are actively pursuing the mortgageable lease rights. What readily comes to mind are a couple of states like Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, which have a long history in assigning even ownership rights to the slums in the past. So these are the kind of states that are moving in the forward direction on this issue. Kimberly has asked about the challenge of legitimizing informal settlements in slum communities. Well, the way the legitimization happens in India is the opposite of notification of slums. Slums are notified in terms of the access to services or inaccess to services, and once the service level is improved in the cities, in these slums, the district administration denotifies these slums as well, and that I believe is an equivalent to legitimizing informal settlements. Janaki has asked about improving access of the slum dwellers to housing finance. I believe yes, and that is what I mentioned even in my presentation. RAI is focused on improving the access of the slum dwellers to institutional home loan facilities. So I'm not able to cite what specific initiatives have been taken, but yes, it's on the radar. examples of in situ redevelopment. There are a number of them. Cities Alliance has supported Agra, for example. Uh, we supported Agra in preparing its citywide slum upgrading plan and also doing a demonstration program on in situ redevelopment. The plan as well as the demonstration program, the demonstration project has catalyzed investments worth some like $40 million from the State Department itself to improve services in 15 slum settlements which are located around the Taj Mahal. This area is called the Taj Ganj. But Agra is not the lone example. There are sporadic examples of in situ upgrading across the country. Forum, this is very ambitious. No one is talking about slum-free cities by the end of the implementation period of RAY. And Andre would also recall that when we started engaging with the national government on the design of RAY, the government was targeting completion period at 5 years. But they realized the idea is not, you cannot have complete slum-free cities by the end of 15 years or 10 years or 20 years. The idea is how do you really slow down the growth of slums so that after a long period, the Indian cities would be without slums. Well, Ray has already learned from the low implementation under BSUP, that is JNNURM implementation, and that is why the focus now is also on strengthening institutional mechanisms for delivery of affordable housing and also building up the capacity of the cities to implement slum upgrading programs. I've already mentioned about the land tenure issue under RAY and the way it's different from BSUP. Now the focus is on assigning long-term mortgageable lease rights to the slum dwellers, and that is where this is one of the reforms that the state government agrees upfront before they are assigned funds under Rajiv Awas Yojana. And Madhya Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh are moving forward in this direction as well. But let's remember these are early days. Please recall the very less number of cities that have been covered just across 3 states under Rajiv Awas Yojana. So the state government along with cities and the national government are still thinking out solutions to resolve this issue. What is provided is a guidance under Rajiv Awas Yojana how the land tenure issue could be addressed. Well, let me not talk about the number of incidents of violence under JNNURM. It's not only the paper by Arjun Patel on implementation of slum upgrading under JNNURM in Surat. There have been a lot of audit reports, social audit reports done by independent agencies engaged by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation, which have shown the pitfalls in implementation of BSUP. The sufferer was not only the quality of the housing that has been constructed, but even the location of these, even the financial liability that has been imposed on the slum dwellers has really pushed them below into the poverty as well. Well, this what has been one of the observation is that the mentality of the people living in EW housing is still of the very similar to that of the people living in slums. Well, it's across cities in India. If you look at these slum redevelopment projects, because of the poor design, non-engagement of the communities while designing these redevelopment projects, it seems as if the horizontal slums have been turned into vertical slums. And these are the kind of issues that are sought to be addressed under Rajiv Awas Yojana. That is what RAY is propagating. It's encouraging cities to engage more closely with the communities in trying to evolve solutions for each of the settlements. It's not recommending across the board strategy for a city. It's suggesting that the plan recommends a bouquet of solutions for various type of settlements in that city. I'm afraid urban programs in India do not capture the imagination of the city dwellers. GNNURM itself did not catch the imagination of the city dwellers. There was very little information available to the people about the program, what it was trying to achieve, various projects that were being covered in a city under JNNURM. And Ray, it's very early days. I don't think there has been any public debate on Ray till this point of time. Andre, I think I have responded to most of the questions that were put forward.
Yes, thank you so much, Ajay, and thank you so much for the participants. I think that both you and the participants have pointed out to a very important challenge. We have one, I think we still have time for a couple of questions. There's one from Janaki that just arrived, and then we'll move to the last part of this webinar.
Well, Janki, the quality of housing constructed under BSUP has been poor, to say the least. There are design flaws, but in addition, the quality of construction is very poor. Besides the construction, access to services is not perfect. Sewerage connectivity is not there, water availability is very poor, and that is the reason why people are very hesitant in moving in occupying these houses as well. It's not only because of that, there is also the bureaucratic lethargy, and that is one of the reasons why the percentage of VUs occupied is less than those that have been completed. And well, we don't know what to expect from Modi. He hasn't talked about slum upgrading. What he's talked about is creating 100 smart cities in India. And that, I believe, would be slum-free cities. That is all I can hope. But there has been no declaration on slum upgrading in any of the manifestos. The opposition party, I mean the ruling party did say, did stress on strengthening urban local bodies, but nothing on slum upgrading.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to recap some of the points from your presentation and the discussion that followed. I think the first one, and I participate in this period together with you and many other colleagues. I think what came to me was that the government of India was doing an effort to address, to learn from the implementation of BSUP, identify the weakness, what didn't work and what worked, and then come with a new mission, the Ray for the Urban Poor, we intend to address exactly the project mentality of BSUP, the slow implementation, the lack of a citywide perspective to the interventions. All these were incorporated in RAY. But as you said, and the participant also point out, to change the mindset and to change the end result is still very challenging. The preferred option, as you said, is still slum redevelopment and resettlement, and so I think that's bring us back to one of the lessons that we are learning, that it's above all is an issue of changing, not only changing policies, but changing really the institutional culture, changing incentives, and changing the political dynamics in addressing housing needs of the urban poor. Thank you very much for this very interesting and very relevant discussion. I think that for many countries, India is a country that is trying new approaches. It's learning from its own failures, also trying to foment private investment in slum redevelopment, deal with tenure issues at scale. Before we close, I would like to invite the participants to send feedback about this seminar, and there is a quick question and answer exercise that they can do it, and we hope to see you all again in our next Inclusive City webinar series. The presentation will be available in the Institute website. Unfortunately, we could not have the image because of connectivity problems that we had in the morning. But thank you so much, and please complete the evaluation of the seminar. Thank you.